All right, well, welcome tonight, guys. Really excited about this seminar. This is one of my favorite seminars to do, and when we get into this, you're going to see that we don't talk a lot about fishing. We're not going to talk too much about specific lures or rods or line, but what we are going to talk about are things that are going to make you a better fisherman every time you're on the water. You know, when I started fishing, as a young kid. I really enjoyed it. Got into high school, started doing some bass fishing. Got into walleye fishing, got into walleye tournament fishing, and now being a guide for the last 15 years. What I realized was the guys who were always good, always catching fish, regardless of what the day was, when I sat down and I had a chance to talk to them, they always had a plan for the day, and they were able to take some of the information and make some good decisions on the water. So when I started teaching, doing seminars 20 years ago, I had to come up with a way to kind of put all those thoughts onto a seminar so we could actually teach the idea, and what we came up with was the 8 steps to catching more and bigger fish. I truly believe that there's a big difference between people who go fishing and fishermen. A lot of people go fishing, very, very few people are fishermen. So what we want to do tonight is give you a way to get started on your way to becoming a fisherman and becoming more successful every time you go out on the water. So lots of things to cover, lots of really cool stuff here. Again, it's not a sexy seminar where we're talking about buy this lure and use this color. But this type of stuff is what's going to make you a better angler every time you're on the water. When I was in college, I had a professor who put this on the board one day and said the main thing is to always remember to make the main thing the main thing. Okay? Pretty simple. Always keep what is really important at the top of the list. You're going to see when we go through this seminar that the list is something that we refer to back quite a bit. We definitely want you to kind of memorize and make sure you have the list somewhere in your boat where you can get to it and look at it again. So the main thing is always to remember to make the main thing the main thing. Well, what is the main thing for fishing success? This is kind of a mantra we came up with at Walleye 101 about 20 years ago. And it's pretty simple. You want to catch more fish? Simply spend more time fishing properly where there are catchable fish. That's the important part. What are catchable fish? Catchable fish are what we call dumb fish. Catchable fish are fish that want to bite. They're usually off the bottom. They're usually grouped tightly with other fish that are feeding. They're usually very, very close to bait, but not just bait, but bait that is grouped and shown in a way on your sonar screen that lets you know that those bait are being attacked. So we're looking for fish that want to be caught, that don't really care. If you spend time fishing where there's catchable fish, you can miss a lot of things in your presentation and still get bit. A lot of guys spend too much time fishing for fish that don't want to bite. So our whole Walleye 101 system and method and ideas are focused around always fishing where there's catchable fish. Fish that are actively, aggressively feeding right now. That way you can do a lot wrong with presentation and still get bit. So that's what the whole idea of these 8 steps are, to get you on not just fish, catchable fish. And when you're there, make some good decisions so you're actually fishing properly where those catchable fish are. It's going to get easier as we go along here. All right, so here's our list. Here's our 8 steps. Location, depth of water, depth of the fish so we know how deep our lures need to be, lure speed, lure size, lure shape, lure action, and lure color. Now it's important that you understand how those are listed. They're listed in 2 different sections. You see the yellow line across here between step 3 and 4. The top part of this is what we call the where. The location, depth of water, how deep the fish are, and where your lure needs to be. And the bottom below the line is what we call the what. Now, here's where I really want to spend a little bit of time. You have to understand that if you do all 3 of these things above the line correctly, you're going to get bit. You can make all mistakes. You can get all of this wrong and still catch 1 or 2 fish. And once you catch 1 or 2, you can start putting together a pattern and catch more. We'll talk about pattern in our pattern fishing DVD. But you can do, if you do everything above the line right, you're in the right spot, you're in the right depth of water, you know how deep the fish are, so you know where to put your lure so the fish can see them. You do those 3 things right, you can do all of this wrong and still get bit. If you do all 5 of these things below the line right, you get the right speed, the right size, the right shape, the right action, the right color. You're worried about the lure. If you get all 5 of those right and miss 1 of these above the line, you will catch 0. Okay? So pay attention. It's much more important to get everything above the line right than it is below the line. So we want to get everything above the line, the where, correct. Then we can start working on the what. So my question before we go any further is pretty simple. Are you fishing backwards? Are you more concerned about what you have on your line or what color it is than where you're putting it? Let me give you a pretty good example. I have 2 examples here. Let's imagine it's deer hunting season. It's opening day of deer hunting. We're going to take you out to the farm. We're going to take you down to the farm, 400 acres, completely mowed flat mud. Opening day of deer season. What I want you to do, I'm going to take you right out in the middle of that 400 acres. I'm going to put a blindfold on you, and I'm going to tell you to put a shell in your gun. You got a blindfold on in the middle of the field, you put a shell in your gun. I'm going to have you spin around in a circle, and when you're ready, bang, shoot your gun. Sounds kind of crazy, right? You'd never expect to shoot a deer that way. That's how most of you fish. You head out to the middle of the lake, you head to a favorite spot, you grab a favorite lure, and you just start casting. You put a whole bunch of things behind the boat and start trolling. No idea if there's fish there, no idea how deep they are, no idea of what type of lure to even start using. So you're just kind of blindly shooting, okay? That's my first example, and that's what I want you to kind of keep in your mind. Are you just, boom, shooting, taking a shot in the dark, and hoping that you catch something? The analogy that brings that together is this, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. We go out to our favorite body of water, say it's Saginaw Bay or Lake Erie. We'll just pick a place that's easy to catch fish. We drive out, we see a bunch of boats on the horizon. We get out close to those boats, we put 6 lures behind the boat. We're driving around, right? We go half an hour, we don't catch anything. So what do? Well, reel in that chartreuse hot and tied and put on a blue and silver hoochie hoochie. So you put a blue and silver hoochie hoochie out. You go another 20 minutes, don't catch anything. Reel in that perch colored shad wrap and take it off and put on a green and gold wooga booga, and you put that out there. And you go another 10 minutes, go reel that in and take this off. And all of a sudden, you get to the point where you're making your 3rd or 4th, 5th change. You go, man, hey, I bought this at the show. Somebody told me this was really good. So you stick that lure on, throw it out there, and in 2 minutes you get a bite. And you are convinced 100% that it was that lure that made a difference, and you're mad you didn't buy 6 more. When in reality, the best lure for the day you had on the start of the day, you just never put it where you had a chance for it to get bit. So stop worrying about color, stop worrying about lure action, stop worrying about all of that until you get in the right place. You can't catch fish unless you're fishing where they are. You're better off to be a really, really bad fisherman with the wrong lure in the right place than you are to be a really, really good fisherman with the right lure but put it in the wrong place. Pay attention to where before you start worrying about what. So the question is pretty simple. Are you fishing backwards? If you're worried about lure color and what lure you're putting on before you know there's fish there, how deep the fish are, so you know where to put your lure, you're not going to have as good a day as you should. Pay attention to these 8 steps, write them down, and make sure you're working from the top down, not the bottom up. Okay, so let's talk about some general things about each of these 8 steps. And again, these are very, very general, and we'll spend some time on other DVDs talking about these in specific. But for right now tonight, let's just talk about some basics. So step 1, location. First thing you need to worry about is seasonal locations. You know, fish, regardless of what they are, basically have 3 things to do with their whole life. They have to worry about where they're going to get their next meal, when are they going to spawn, when and where are they going to spawn, and they've got to worry about not getting eaten until they get to a certain size. Most of their life is focused 100% on where's my next meal going to come. So you have to understand that other than the spawn time, and a little bit of time before and a little bit of time after to recover, all of a fish's life is one thing. Where's my food? Where's my food? Where's my food? Now, we know for a fact, and we've proven this over years and years and years, fish won't live in 30 feet of water and swim to 8 feet of water, feed, and then go back to 30. If the food is all in 8 feet of water, that's where the fish are going to be. So you need to understand what kind of bait fish live in the body of water you're fishing, how they move over the course of the year and during the day, and find out where the best bait choices are for the fish that are in your lake. If you pay attention to bait fish, you know, if you learn nothing about walleyes or largemouth bass or pike or muskie, you know nothing about them, but you understand what kind of bait fish lives in the body of water you're fishing and where it goes every day, you will catch a lot more game fish just by being where the bait fish are. We do a DVD in our foundation series called Bait Fish, something you might want to check out. Walks you through the life cycle and the seasonal cycle of about 11 different types of bait fish. Really important to understand the bait fish and what they do. Another thing to location, water color, water clarity. You know, we know for a fact that walleyes won't hit a bait unless they can actually see it. So water color and water clarity becomes a big part of walleye fishing, not just to find fish, but to be able to find, remember, we're not looking for walleyes, we're looking for catchable walleyes. So water color and water clarity can be a big deal of this. Now, we make it pretty simple at Walleye 101. If you talk to any of our guys, we're going to break water color and water clarity into small pieces. So We have 3 different watercolors. We have brown, green, and blue. That's all we deal with watercolor. Brown, green, or blue. In water clarity, we have 3 different clarities. We have clear, which means you look over the back of your boat, you can see your prop. We have stained, which means you look over the back of your boat, you can't see your prop, you can see the cavitation plate. And then we have dirty water, which means you can't see your cavitation plate. I'll make it pretty simple for you as far as watercolor goes. I have fished for walleyes from Fort Peck, Montana to the eastern end of Lake Erie, and from Lake of the Woods in northern Ontario to Bull Shoals, Arkansas. I have never fished a place for any fish, but specifically walleye, that your best fishing is not in green water. Look for green water. Stay out of the blue. There's not enough life in there. It's too cold. It's too clear. Stay out of the brown for walleyes. Most times brown water is too dirty. Fish aren't going to bite. Look for green water. And I like clear green or stained green. If I can find the perfect water, if I had to pick the perfect water, it would be a nice green tint where I could see my cavitation plate. I call that Erie perfect. That's what I look for on Lake Erie and any place else I fish. So stay out of the blue, stay out of the brown, look for the green, and look for where you can see your prop or your cavitation plate. That's going to help you with location. We're going to talk about how to do that. We have another seminar, another foundation DVD called Pattern Fishing. We talk about how to get that information and actually know where the good water is. Water temperature is important more so for where the fish are going to be, where are they at in their life cycle over the course of the season, and it definitely relates to bait fish. Where are the bait fish? What are they doing? Where are the fish going to be? Available cover, and again, available cover relates right back to bait. If you have good green weeds, you're going to have small perch. You're going to have shiners that are living inside the weeds. I'm going to tell you what, guys, in the middle of July and August, when it's 95 degrees outside, the surface temperature is 82 degrees, there are walleyes in 6, 7, 8 feet of water in the weeds. It's loaded with bait. There's fish there. Ask all the bass fishermen that catch them by accident, right? They're not smart enough to figure out they actually should have caught them anyway. But the walleyes will use the cover. So if you have cover, bait fish are going to use the cover, which means walleyes are going to use the cover. Fishing pressure sometimes will move fish and create a situation where they get away from certain spots. And then wind direction. Man, we do a whole summer on wind, waves, currents, subsurface currents. Something you really start needing to pay attention to, kind of more an advanced seminar. But wind direction can, again, push bait fish to certain parts of the lake, which will then bring the catchable fish. So that's some basic general things to look at before you go fishing and kind of get an idea what the fish are going to do when you're out on the lake. So that's the location piece of it. And remember, walleyes are only going to be where their bait is. This is one fish. This is a Lake Erie fish full of shad, and that fish still ate a bait. So when fish are on bait and they're actively, aggressively feeding, they don't care if they're too full. They don't care if your bait's too big, too small, wrong color. They're going to bite it if they're in an aggressive, catchable mode. So look for catchable fish. You're going to catch a lot more fish by doing everything wrong presentation-wise if you're where there's fish that want to be caught. Okay, step 2 is the depth of water. So again, some general guidelines here. Shallow water in early season. But shallow water doesn't just mean the bank out to 6 or 7, 8 feet of water. It also means the top 8, 9 feet of water over 40 feet of water. Right? It's that top part of the water column. Shallow water is not just the shore out, it's also the top part of the water column. Why shallow in early season? Well, we're coming out of winter, water's fairly cold, all of the plankton, all the insects, everything that's hatching is taking place in the top part of the water column. The sun warms that top part, the plankton comes to the top, bugs come to eat the plankton, bait comes to eat the plankton, fish come to eat the bait. So everything is happening in shallow water, either shallow water right offshore or the top part of the water column in early season. As we get into early summer, water temps start to get in that 70-degree range. If there's available bait, walleyes will make a migration to a little bit deeper water. Again, it's all dependent on bait. Walleyes are not going to go deep just because it's hot. If there's no bait down there, they're not going to go. So we have to know what kind of bait fish live in the lake. But if you've got shad, you've got alewife, you've got maybe some smelt, some ciscos, some chubs, some suckers. Those fish are going to go a little bit deeper in early summer. Walleyes are going to follow them. Now, here's where a lot of guys mess up. Once we get to midsummer and the water is kind of peaking its temperature, if we're in deep water, remember, we're going to get a thermocline. We're going to get a layer of water that separates the warm upper layer from the cold bottom layer. That's called the thermocline. Walleyes very, very rarely are going to penetrate the top edge of that thermocline. So even though it's cooler down deep, there's not enough oxygen down there, those fish are going to actually come to the top part of the water column. You usually get a thermocline in 20, 30, 40 feet down, over 50, 60, 70 feet of water. So if you see a thermocline in your lake, In your walleye fishing, you're going to make sure that you concentrate above that thermocline in the summer. So the hot water summer doesn't send fish deep. It actually compresses the amount of water they can use to the top part of the water column and sends them into cover. So if you are going, man, it's really hot, the sun's out, and you're fishing really, really slow on the bottom in 50, 60 feet of water, you may be fishing where there's no walleyes. So your attitude is, walleyes don't bite in the summer. Some guys, even old wives' tale, walleyes lost their teeth when it got 70 degrees. It's not the case. The fish are in the top part of the water column, and they're in cover, actually feeding aggressively, because when the water gets in that 70, 72 degree range, walleyes need to eat their body weight in food about every 36, 40 hours. So they're constantly eating. Fish eat a whole lot more in the summer than they do in the spring and the fall. It's just tough for us fishing because there's a lot of natural bait and a lot of options, and most of us aren't fishing where the fish are. Let me give you a practical example here. We already talked about weeds. I want to talk about something that guys miss. If you fish a body of water, and this is where understanding your bait fish goes a long way to being a good fisherman. If you fish in a body of water that has plankton-eating bait fish, and I'm talking about shiners, shad, alewives, bait fish that eat plankton, what happens in the summertime? It's been hot for 3 or 4 days. It's been flat calm, no wind. What happens to the plankton in the summertime? Plankton all comes where? Top of the water column. Well, if I'm a plankton-eating bait fish, where am I going to go? Top of the water column. Well, if all my bait is up here at the surface, where am I going to be if I'm a big walleye I need to eat? Top of the water column. So if you have shad, shiners, alewives, if you have bait in your lake that eats plankton, the hotter, flatter, calmer, brighter it is in the summertime, you better be fishing very, very shallow, the top part of the water column, and very, very fast, because that's where the fish are, and that's how those bait fish are moving. A lot of guys go, summertime, it's really hot, sun's up, oh my gosh, I got to fish before the sun comes up. If I fish during the day, I got to go really, really slow on the bottom. You're fishing below all the active fish, you got no chance of catching them. Understanding bait fish has a lot to do with all of this. Once the thermocline breaks up, fish can be anywhere. You get into early fall, I'm talking about 65 degrees, 63 degrees, somewhere in there. You'll start to see a movement. Fish will be deep, fish will be shallow. Any place there's bait, it's on. And this is kind of a time of year we kind of call scrounge. You catch 2 on a rock pile in 6 feet of water, casting a jig. You'll catch 4 trolling spoons on lead core in open water. You'll catch a couple more 30, 35 feet deep on a jig, deep part. They're anywhere. You just got to kind of go look and kind of scrounge up. But once we get to about 55 degrees, you're going to see a movement of walleyes towards the deepest basin, the deepest water that's available in the lake that you're fishing. Okay? They may not be on the bottom. They may only be 6, 8, 10, 12 feet, 15 feet down like they are a lot in Lake Erie in the fall, but they're going to be over the deepest water you can find or really, really close to that deep water on extremely steep breaks. So, again, we can spend hours talking about location, and we do in some of our other DVDs and some of our other seminars, but just as a general rule of thumb, keep those things in mind as you're looking at the time of year, where should I be looking for my walleyes? Okay? So, once we do that, we've kind of looked at the water, we've kind of started to eliminate some water, and that's what we're trying to do with each of these steps. Each of these steps is starting to eliminate some water. Okay? Where are the fish going to be right now? Well, they should be in this general area. Okay? Well, what kind of bait's available? What kind of depth should they be? Well, they should be here. So now, every time we go down one step, the spot, the option that places that fish can be gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So we're not dealing with a big lake, we're dealing with a small piece of a lake. So once we get that figured out, now what we do is we need to find out where the fish are so we know how deep to put our lures. So it's important that we get the right location, get the right depth of water, and then figure out where the fish are so we can put our baits above. Remember, walleyes, like any other game fish, have their eyes forward and high on their head. That means that they're looking up most of the time. Okay? Fish are basically blind down below this line. This white triangle here is where fish can actually see. So they're basically blind down here. So let's back up. Right lure, right size, right color, right action, right speed, right depth of water, but right here, you catch nothing. Okay? So we've got to understand that we've got to get our baits above the fish, especially in open water. We need to get our baits above the fish so they can see it. They can't see it, they're not going to bite it. Not going to bite it, we're not going to have a great day. So we have to understand how deep the fish are so we can start catching fish and getting our baits above them. Okay? You can't tell me a bait didn't work if you never know it went over fish. So we've got to make sure we have all this right before we put baits in the water. And it's very, very simple. Use your sonar to find fish. We're simply using our sonar to look for fish, and once we find them, so there's some walleyes here, and we'll talk about that in our sonar interpretation DVD. All these aren't walleyes, but this is a great example. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 5 walleyes on the screen, but these 3 right here, up off the bottom, they're catchable. School of bait that's grouped tightly together and being pushed to the surface. That means that these fish are actively, aggressively feeding on that bait. It's lights out here. You get anything that wiggles and shines right here, I don't care what it is, fish are going to bite it. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a situation where we have catchable fish, bait that are grouped tightly together, fish are off the bottom, grouped tightly together, and once we figure this out, then we can put a bait in the water. There's no sense, absolutely 0 sense, because none of you are good enough fishermen to catch fish where there aren't any. Right? None of you are that good. We all have to be fishing where the fish are. So my question to you is, how can we put a bait in the water and be disappointed when it doesn't catch fish if we don't know we're in the right location and we don't know there's fish there, which means we don't know how deep to put our baits before we even start. If you don't have those 3 things figured out, fish are here, this is how deep they are, this is where my baits need to be. If you don't have those 3 things figured out, there's no sense putting a bait in the water because you are just wasting time. You're just fishing. You're going fishing. You're not being a fisherman, you're just going fishing. We want you to be a fisherman. So once I figure out where the fish are, I start about 2 to 6 feet above the fish. Again, we talk about this in our pattern fishing DVD on how to kind of get this depth figured out and kind of how to work that. But general rule of thumb, I start about 2 to 6, maybe 10 feet above the fish. So just kind of keep that in. So we're looking for fish on our sonar. We're in the right location. We know how deep of water we are. We know where the fish are. We know where to start putting our baits. Now we can let the fish tell us, do they want the bait that we're using or not? Okay, because now we know we're fishing where there's actionable, catchable fish. We know our bait's above so they can see it. Then we're going to get an answer from them, yes or no. Then we can start working through the process of catching fish. Okay, so there's the where. That's the top part. Again, if we do all 3 of these things right, we can do all of this wrong and still catch fish. So we've got the where part right. Concentrate on the where. Okay, so once you get that dialed in, then we get into the fishing part of this, right? And now we start talking about the what. And you're going to see one word in all of these watts. We're going to talk about lure speed, lure size, lure shape, lure action, and lure color. There's going to be one word when we break down each one of these that's going to show up in every single one of these 5 breakdowns, and that word is going to be bait fish. Guys, if you don't understand what kind of bait fish live in your lake, how it acts at different times of the year, your chance of maximizing your catch goes way, way down. You have to understand bait fish. I don't care what you fish for. You have to understand the bait fish. So what are we trying to do with the speed of the lure? And again, remember that as we're working, whatever's at the top, the higher up the list an item is, the more important it is. Okay? So we're going to get to color. I'm not saying color is not important. I'm saying color is not important until all of these are right. You're better off to have a lure above the fish at the right speed and have it be the wrong color than you are to have the right color at the wrong speed and not where the fish can see it. Okay? So we're working from the top. We get the location, depth of water, how deep are the fish, where our lures go. Then we start working this way down the list. Okay? So, speed of lure. Try to match the swimming speed of bait fish. Sounds pretty generic, but it's true. If you watch a shad go through the water in 72-degree water, it moves completely different than a smelt moves going through 45-degree water. So you want the speed of your lure to match what the fish are feeding. Okay? Very, very simple. If you want to get really simple about it, the warmer the water, the faster you should be going. The colder the water, the slower you'll be going. Now, we're going to do some advanced seminars on that because I think that is wrong. I got some data to prove that. But for general rules of purpose, colder the water, the slower you can go. Warmer the water, the faster you can go. Use lure styles that work inside that speed range. Now, if you're like me, you're a crankbait junkie, you've got 17 million crankbaits, right? Crankbait specifically, each bait is designed to work inside a speed range. Some work better low speeds, some work better at high speeds. It's important that when you try to figure out where you're going to try to get your lure speed, that you pick lures that work. You don't want to be going 2.5, 2.7, 2.8 in the summertime and put a number 13 Rapala in the water. Ain't going to work, right? Conversely, trying to fish a Hottentot at 0.8, 0.9, 1 mile an hour, the bait's just going to do this and not have its action. So every lure has a speed range it really excels at. In the middle is what we call shad baits, kind of like shad wraps, rip shads, Berkeley flicker shads, those types of baits. Those work good at the top end of the slow spectrum and all the way up through the high speed. So shad baits you can fish every day. The decision is, do I put high-speed baits in with my shad baits, or do I put what we call minnow baits, long skinny baits, in with my shad baits? So you want to mix your bait styles, but make sure they work inside the speed range that you're trying to duplicate that day. Changes of speeds can trigger fish, slowing up, speeding up, slowing down, churning the boat. All those things make a difference, and that's all part of the presentation process, trying to figure out what's happening. Pay attention to this, right? Did I catch fish when I turned? If I turn, the outside, the lure that's the furthest from the outside is going to be going the fastest. The lure that's closest to the boat is going to be going the slowest. So pay attention. I turn, all of a sudden I start to catch fish on the outside offshore board. Maybe I need to go a little faster, okay? Or maybe you don't need to go faster. You need to keep going the speed you're going and just keep turning. Because sometimes it's not the speed, it's actually the turn. I know a lot of guys will slow down and speed back up. And they'll slow down and speed up. And all of a sudden they'll catch fish. They'll go from, let's say, 1.6 to 2.5. And they go from 1.6 to 2.5 and they catch fish. They do it again, they catch another one. And they go 2.5 and don't catch anymore. Well, you got to understand that it wasn't 2.5, it was the change from 1.6 to 2.5. So you got to constantly be changing your speed. Pay attention to what happens when you catch a fish, be able to duplicate it and see if it really does make a difference. And then be able to measure and duplicate successful speeds. Easiest way is speed over ground on your GPS. We've been working a lot the last couple of years with apparatuses that go down below and actually give us depth and speed where our lures are running. You'd be amazed sometimes what the difference is, even in shallow water, especially in a place like Lake Erie, we get lots of current. More on that to come later, but easiest way to do this is speed over ground on your GPS, okay? So once we get the speed dialed in, we start catching one or two, again, the right location, right at the water, got our lures in the right place. We start, speed is the easiest thing to change, right? So we change our speed, boom, catch a fish. We know our speed has to be between 2 miles an hour and 2.2. Just use that for an example. So now we got our speed dial in. Now we can start working down the list again. And the next thing, most important, we want to work on is the size of the lure. And again, you'll see this word right here, bait fish. Try to match your lure size to the size of the bait fish in the area, okay? If the fish are eating small bait, give them small bait. Fish are eating big bait. Springtime, fish are up in the shallows. They're kind of looking for a meal. It's early season. There's a bunch of smelt in the lake. You don't want to go out there with a 2-inch lure when their fish are biting 5, 6, 7-inch smelt, right? Conversely, if the fish are feeding on just hatch shiners that are 1.5 inches, 2 inches long, that 7-inch bait that caught them in the spring is useless. So we want to match the size of the lure to the bait fish in the area, okay? Here's something that we talk about every time we do this seminar. Big baits in spring and fall. The colder the water, the bigger your baits have to be. One of the mistakes I see a lot of guys make, and I used to make it all the time. Early season, first or second trip, right? Middle of April, let's say. I get out to the lake's really clear, the lake's really cold. Man, small bait. Wrong. Most of our bait up here in the upper Midwest, Michigan where I'm from, most of the bait hatches in late April, most of it in May, some in early June. Well, you go all the way around again through the calendar, and it's April. There is no more 2-inch bait left in the lake. Everything that's left is this big. So the fish have been eating 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-inch baits for the last 6, 7, 8 months. You give them a little small thing, they're not going to bite it. You're not going to get as many fish. The colder the water is, the bigger the baits need to be. My rule of thumb is simple. Before Mother's Day, I only fish big baits. Between Mother's Day and Father's Day, I fish a mix, right? Big baits and small baits, let the fish tell me. And from Father's Day on, I'll start with 2-inch baits, and as the season goes on, I'll start increasing. By the time we get to 4th of July, especially into August, I'm fishing a lot of 4, 5, 6, 7-inch baits. When we get to fall, you get to October, November, early December, if you can get out, most of the baits I fish are at least 5 inches long. So as the water gets colder, your baits need to get bigger. Okay? Pay attention to that. Here's what's important to understand. A walleye's preferred forage size is 1/4 to 1/3 their body length. That's what they want to eat. Okay? So think about it. Up where I live, a 10-pound walleye is 30 inches long. That's kind of the number, right? 30 inches is 10 pounds. So 1/4 or 1/3 of 30 inches is 7.5 to 10 inches. That's what they want to eat. You're not going to scare them away with a number 9 Rapala. Trust me. Okay? There's this, and it's getting better, but there was this perception that walleyes we're sissy namby-pamby fish, right? Got to use really, really thin line, go really, really slow. They'll only eat live bait, got to use small hooks. That's absolutely crap. Walleyes are top-end predators. If you don't believe me, the next time you catch one, do me a favor. Put your thumb in his mouth, close his mouth, and pull your thumb out. Watch what happens. That is not the mouth of a namby-pamby nibbler. That is a fish that can eat whatever he wants, whenever he wants. Take advantage of that, especially when fish are aggressive. Fish bigger baits. But saying that, walleye can get very, very picky as far as size. I used to do a lot of stream trout fishing. That's how I grew up. I spent a lot of time studying and keeping records. There are times that a size 16 fly catches them, size 14 doesn't, and that little bit of difference is very, very subtle. But I've also seen times, walleye fishing, where you can catch them on number 5 flicker shad, can't catch them on number 7 flicker shad. For whatever reason. Don't know why, it just is that way. So what I try to do once I start catching fish is I put a bunch of different size lures out, and then you'll start to see a pattern where they're biting a certain size, and I just start compressing from there and putting more baits, different style baits, that size out, and then the fish will start to tell me what's going on. Pay attention to the bait fish, match your lure to the size of the bait fish, you're going to get a lot more bites. All right, and there you go. You can see this is another fall Lake Erie fish. That is actually a white bass that's just under 12 inches long, and that came out of the stomach of a 6.5-pound walleye. So that walleye was only about 26, 27 inches long, and there's a white bass in there almost 12 inches long. That's what they eat, guys. They're not afraid to eat bait that big. Don't be afraid to throw big lures. Okay, shape of the lure. Again, we're right back to the same thing. Man, we're back to this bait fish. Try to match your lure shape to the shape of the bait fish. Long, skinny, short and fat, somewhere in between, right? I would tell you this without hesitation. Lure profile is more important than color most days. You're better off to have a lure that looks right, matches the bait fish the fish are biting in the wrong color, than you are to have the right color in a bait that's not right. So pay attention to that shape of the lure. Long and skinny, short and fat. Again, general rule of thumb, colder the water is, the longer and skinnier your bait should be. As the water gets warmer, shorter and fatter the bait should be. That's kind of what the fish are feeding on. Again, unless you're fishing in deep water and fish are feeding on ciscos, that's a whole different attitude. But the shape of the lure should match the bait fish. Let's do it this way. Let's say you're sitting here at the seminar and we're going to have dinner. And I tell you we're going to have filet mignon and hot dogs. Okay? So we'll take a little break. We're going to have dinner. And I've got a bunch of little pieces of meat that look like a hockey puck up here. Okay? Sitting on a plate. And then another plate, I've got these 6-inch long tubes of meat. And I told you we're going to have filet and we're going to have hot dogs. Now, you don't know that I went to the butcher and said, hey, do me a favor. Chop up that filet, stick it in casing, make it like a hot dog, and take all that hot dog crap, chop it up, and make it look like a filet. But I've got a little hockey puck sized piece of meat here, and I've got a long tube. You want a filet. Which one are you going to grab? You're going to grab that piece that looks like a filet, even though it's crappy hot dog meat. Right? That's the same idea, the shape of the lure. Shape of the lure has to look like the bait fish that the fish are eating. You can't stick a 2-inch bait in there and expect to get bit when the fish are eating 7-inch long skinny bait fish. Conversely, you can't take a 7-inch long skinny bait, stick it in the water when they're feeding on 3-inch shad. Okay, so pay attention to what the fish are eating, what they should be eating. Lure profile is much, much more important every day than color. When you take the speed of the lure, the size of the lure, the shape of the lure, those three things kind of come together to what we call the action of the lure. And the action is pretty simple. If you do those 3 steps right, you'll end up with the right action. If you want to start picking lures, action of the lure is pretty simple. Aggressive moving lures in warmer water, more subtle lures in colder water. That's pretty simple. Again, longer, skinnier lures have a more subtle action. Shorter, fatter lures have a more aggressive action. That kind of goes with everything we just talked about, right? So that's the speed you're going to fish, the size of the lure, the shape of the lure, all go up to make the action. Again, real aggressive lures in warm water, subtle, soft-moving lures in colder water. And lastly, we get to color. Okay? Lastly. Color is not important until everything else is right. I will never tell you color is not important because that's not true. There are times that certain colors catch more fish. But it's not important if you're putting the right color in the wrong place, or the right color at the wrong speed, or the right color at the wrong depth. You've got to get all those things right before you start playing with color. Color is kind of the last factor to worry about. Not important until. I would tell you this, contrast is more important than the actual color. It's so funny when I watch guys, we get a lot of guys now who've been fishing for a while or seminars or guys who are fairly new. The guys I like to get the most are guys who just started fishing 3 or 4 years ago. They went and bought a whole bunch of stuff. So they heard that reef runners work. Let's just use a reef runner for example. And reef runners are great lures. So they went to the store and said, man, I'm going to go to Lake Erie in the fall and need some reef runners. So I opened their box and they got 500 reef runners. And they've got silver with a blue back, and silver side with a green back, and silver side with a black. I'm like, these are all the same. Because remember, walleyes, especially in open water, come from where to hit their baits? They come from the bottom, right? So they don't see. All they say is silver, 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 silver. So you want silver with a dark back, so you get that contrast like a live bait fish, right? Light sides, dark top. But they don't care if that top is green, blue, orange, yellow. They don't care. So what happens is the guy has all these baits that are silver with a different color on top, but he doesn't have any other baits in any different color profiles. So pay attention to that, right? If you've got silver with black, silver with blue, you're done. You got silver. You're finished. I would tell you this, especially in open water, pay attention to the bottom of the lure. Because remember, fish are coming from the bottom. Anytime you're crankbait fishing, pay attention to the bottom. So pay attention to the bottom, okay? I'll make it really simple for you. Bottom of the lure catches fish. Top of the lure catches fishermen. So if you've got silver and black and silver and blue, you're done. Some should have an orange belly, some should have a chartreuse belly, some should have a pink belly, but pay attention to the bottom, not the top. And in open water, I have stacks and stacks and stacks of data. I'm a very, very detailed record keeper, and we talk about that in a couple of our other foundation seminars, the 5 Ps to fishing success and pattern fishing. We talk about keeping and collecting data. I will tell you without question, you will catch more fish every day if your lure has purple, red, orange, or pink on the bottom. Don't care where you fish. If it has purple, red, orange, or pink on the bottom, you're going to catch more fish than will fishing lures without that. Every lure color that I've designed for Mike up at Warrior Lures, crankbaits, spoons, and spinners, every color that I've designed for him has some combination of purple, red, orange, or pink on it. I am convinced that it absolutely makes a difference in catching more fish on the bottom of the lure. Okay, so remember prop, purple, red, orange, pink. Pay attention to the color on the bottom of the lure. All right, let's go back and recap. And again, as we recap here, I want you to ask yourself, are you fishing backwards most days? Do you worry about changing color in action and don't know that there's fish? Good friend of mine, Brian Jurgen, was part of our group. Unfortunately, we lost Brian a couple years ago to skin cancer. But I got a chance to see Brian. Brian was one of the guys, it's a perfect example of what we do at Walleye 101. He was someone who went fishing. He found our seminars, bought into what we were teaching, and he became a fisherman. And it was funny. We were fishing, we went to our fall fishing education weekend at Lake Erie one year, and Brian had just really bought into everything we were teaching. And we teach guys, and you'll know when you're a fisherman when you do this. I have a rule in my boat, very, very simple. A lot of our guys have the same rule. No rods come out of the rod locker until we know we're fishing where fish are. Because it's too easy. If there's rods out, let's just go fishing. Well, some days you have to drive half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. I spent 2.5 hours, 3 hours on charters without putting a rod in the water because there's no sense putting a lure in the water if there's no fish there. So Brian actually bought into that. And he went out one day and had a fantastic day, caught a bunch of fish. And he sent me a picture. He caught his first 10-pound walleye. And he sent me a picture of the 10-pound walleye. And I said, you know, hey, that's awesome. He goes, no, he's look at the sonar. I'm like, why? He goes, look at the sonar. And he had taken a tag, made a label on the top of his sonar, and it said very simply, are there catchable fish here? He bought into the idea so much that you can't catch fish unless you're fishing where they are, that he made himself a note on his sonar. And the idea was, if he looked, go, man, I'm going to fish, and he turned around, looked at the sonar, and read that, are there catchable fish here? And if his answer was not a resounding yes, he put the boat back on plane and went looking. That's where you need to get to maximize your time on the water and maximize your catch. You can't catch fish unless you're fishing where the fish are, and you put your baits where the fish can see them. Are you fishing backwards? If you are, hopefully you've taken some notes, written this down, and start working your way through the process every time you're on the water. Stop worrying about what's not important until you get what is important figured out. Okay? We talked about we're keeping data. This is a catch report sheet we came up with about 10, 12 years ago. You record all your weather data up top, and then for each fish, You can record to that. I keep these on the boat, and I make very, very quick notes when I catch fish. And again, in our pattern fishing DVD and our 5-piece of Fishing Success DVD, we talk about this in detail on how to do this. If you want to download these, very simple, you can go to walleye101.com/plan-a-trip. And you can go to the bottom of that page. You can actually see where you can download the catch report sheets. Download these. Start keeping data. That data is going to be huge to making better decisions the next time you're on the water. But find some way to record all the fishing data, all the things that are important. And you'll see that we have these 8 steps, right? Location, depth of water, depth of fish, how deep is my lure, speed, size, shape, action, color. And this basically goes the same way. Latitude, longitude is location. How deep is the water? What time did I catch that fish? How big was the fish I caught? What lure did I use? What color? How far back was it so I know how deep it was? And what speed? So all those 8 things are on our sheet of paper. We can make good decisions over the course of the day by seeing what's actually happening. Okay? So those 8 steps, I'm going to leave those up here while we close. Make sure you write those down and make sure you're fishing correctly. Don't fish backwards. Fish from the top down, regardless of what you're fishing for. You're going to catch a lot more fish. Hey, thanks for joining us in this DVD. Had a great time doing this. This is one of my favorite seminars to do because I know if you start looking at this and follow this, I promise you, you'll become a better fisherman. You're going to have days. Now, you may not catch 50 fish every day, but when everybody else is catching 2 and you've got 8, you've done something really, really good. That's what this does for you. Paying attention to what is important and then working step by step to dial in exactly what the fish want that day. And again, we talk more detail about that in our 5-piece The Fishing Success DVD and our trip planning and pattern fishing DVD. Okay? Thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time. Have a great fishing season. We'll see you next time.